Wife uncover the truth behind her husband Ronald's disappearance with her savings $500,000, navigating a world of secrets and betrayal, which leads to a poignant mix of confrontation, revelation, and personal growth. Bianca Allen had always prided herself on her foresight and meticulous nature, especially when it came to finances. Nestled in the quiet comfort of their suburban home, she had been the one to manage their savings, diligently squirreling away a portion of their income for what she dreamt would be a serene and secure future. This future, as she envisioned, was to be shared with Ronald, her husband of 10 years, whose charming smile still managed to send a flutter through her heart. It was a typical Thursday evening when Bianca's world began to unravel. After a long day at the architecture firm where she worked, she logged into their joint bank account, intending to transfer some funds for an upcoming vacation. The screen blinked and the numbers stared back at her, cold and unyielding. The account balance read a stark, incomprehensible zero. Confusion gave way to a numbing disbelief. Ronald must have transferred it by mistake, she muttered to herself, refusing to entertain any other possibility. But as minutes turned to hours without any sign of Ronald, a chilling realization began to dawn on her. He had never been late without calling, and he certainly wouldn't leave without a word. Panic and betrayal started to set in as the evening sky darkened. By midnight, with no sign of Ronald and no response to her frantic calls and messages, Bianca knew she had to face the truth. Her husband had disappeared, and so had their life savings of $500,000. The next morning, Bianca sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by years of financial statements, bank documents, and a steaming cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The events of the previous night felt surreal, like a fragment of a bad dream she couldn't shake off. She called the bank, only to be told what she already knew: the funds were withdrawn 2 days ago, in cash, by Ronald. Her friends and family urged her to let it go, to consider it a painful end to a chapter in her life. But Bianca couldn't. Not just because of the money, but because she needed answers. She needed to know why the man she loved, the man she trusted more than anyone, would betray her in such a cold and calculated manner. Determined, Bianca began her own investigation. She started by scouring through Ronald's personal belongings, looking for any clue he might have left behind. In his study, amidst the clutter of books and papers, she found a series of receipts from a small coffee shop in a part of town they seldom visited. It was a start, a faint trail, but it was all she had. As she stepped out of their house, a resolve settled over Bianca. She would find Ronald, not just for the sake of recovering her savings, but to confront the man who had shattered their shared dreams. She had no idea where her search would lead her or what secrets she would uncover along the way. But she knew one thing for certain: the truth was out there, and she would find it, no matter the cost. The faint morning light filtered through the blinds of Bianca's home office, casting long shadows across the floor. She sat there, surrounded by the remnants of her previous life, with Ronald photographs, mementos, and now, the cryptic receipts from the unfamiliar coffee shop. These small slips of paper were her only lead, and she clutched them like lifelines, determined to unravel the mystery they held. She decided to visit the coffee shop, a quaint, nondescript place tucked away in a less frequented part of town. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, announcing her presence. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside her. Bianca approached the counter, showing the barista one of Ronald's receipts. "Have you seen this man recently?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety knotting her stomach. The barista, a young man with a friendly demeanor, studied the receipt and then the photograph of Ronald she offered. His brow furrowed in concentration before he nodded slowly. "Yeah, he's been coming here a lot over the past few months. Always sat at the back, usually with someone else." "Someone else?" Bianca's heart skipped a beat. "Can you describe them?" The barista shrugged. Not really. Different people, but there was this one guy he met with more than the others. Older, kinda serious looking. They would talk for hours. Grasping onto this new information, Bianca thanked the barista and made her way to the back of the cafe. She sat at the table Ronald had apparently favored, trying to picture him there, to sense some remnant of his presence. It felt surreal, being in a place that had been a part of his life she knew nothing about. As she pondered her next move, a man at a nearby table caught her attention. He was watching her with an intensity that was hard to ignore. After a moment, he approached her. "You're looking for Ronald, aren't you?" he asked in a low voice. Bianca's guard immediately went up. "Who are you?" The man introduced himself as Martin, claiming to be an old business associate of Ronald's. He seemed to know quite a bit about Ronald's visits to the cafe and hinted at knowing more about his sudden disappearance. His eyes held a mixture of concern and caution as he spoke. "Why should I trust you?" Bianca asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "I can't force you to," Martin replied. "But I believe I can help you find what you're looking for." Bianca was hesitant, but Martin's offer was the only lead she had. She agreed to work with him, albeit with a healthy dose of skepticism. Over the next few days, Bianca and Martin met regularly. He took her through a labyrinth of Ronald's lesser-known dealings, introducing her to people and places that were completely alien to her. Each encounter left her with more questions than answers, painting a picture of Ronald that was increasingly complex and mysterious. Bianca also began to notice a change in herself. The woman who had once been content with her orderly, predictable life was now delving into the unknown, driven by a mix of betrayal and an unyielding desire for the truth. She realized that this journey was not just about finding Ronald or the money, it was also about discovering who she really was beneath the layers of the life she had built with him. Bianca's quest to unravel the truth about Ronald's disappearance had taken her to places she never imagined she would venture. Each day brought new revelations, each more bewildering than the last. Martin, who had become her unlikely ally in this journey, navigated her through the murky waters of Ronald's secret life with an expertise that both impressed and unnerved her. Their search led them through the underbelly of the city, from dimly lit back alleys to upscale offices that belied the shady transactions conducted within. Bianca found herself in a world far removed from her comfortable suburban life, a world where trust was a luxury few could afford. One chilly evening, they met with a contact of Martin's, a man known only as Finch. In a secluded corner of a rundown bar, Finch divulged information that turned Bianca's understanding of her husband on its head. Ronald had been involved in a high-stakes investment scheme, one that was far from legal and fraught with danger. Bianca listened, her heart sinking with each word. The Ronald she knew, the man she had married, seemed like a distant memory, replaced by this stranger Finch described. Despite the risks, Bianca pressed on, driven by a need for closure. She found herself adapting to this new reality, her instincts sharpening, her resolve hardening. She began to see patterns in Ronald's behavior, clues that she had previously missed, and with Martin's help, she started connecting the dots. As they delved deeper, Bianca also began to see a different side of Martin. Beneath his rough exterior lay a man who had faced his own share of troubles. He spoke little of his past, but in his guarded expressions and the occasional glimpse of sorrow in his eyes, Bianca recognized a kindred spirit. They were both, in their own ways, seeking redemption. But with every step closer to Ronald, the danger escalated. They had a close call one night, narrowly escaping a group of men who seemed to be following them. The incident left Bianca rattled, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. She was playing a high-stakes game, one that could cost her more than just her missing savings. Despite the danger, Bianca's determination only grew stronger. She realized that this journey was no longer just about finding Ronald, it was about reclaiming her life from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. She was no longer the woman who sat helplessly at her kitchen table, poring over bank statements and wondering where it all went wrong. She was now a woman on a mission, unafraid to face whatever lay ahead. As the chapter closes, Bianca and Martin receive a tip about a possible sighting of Ronald in a distant city. Without hesitation, Bianca decides to follow this lead, setting the stage for the next phase of her journey. With each step, she sheds a part of her old self, embracing the unknown and the challenges it brings. She is ready to confront whatever lies ahead, to face Ronald and the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The cold, crisp air of the new city greeted Bianca as she stepped off the train, Martin by her side. They had traveled hundreds of miles following the lead that promised a sighting of Ronald. Bianca's heart was a tumult of emotions: hope, anger, fear, and a desperate longing for resolution. The city was a stark contrast to the familiarity of her home. Skyscrapers towered above, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. Bianca felt small in this vast, unfamiliar place, but her resolve did not waver. She was here for a purpose, and she would not leave until she fulfilled it. Their first stop was a modest hotel where the informant had spotted Ronald. As they navigated through the crowded lobby, Bianca's mind raced with possibilities. What would she say to Ronald when she saw him? How would she react? The uncertainty was overwhelming, but she pushed these thoughts aside. She needed to focus on the task at hand. At the hotel, they learned that Ronald had checked out 2 days earlier. However, the receptionist remembered him because he had been particularly anxious and kept to himself. This small piece of information was both a lead and a dead end. They were close, yet so far. Determined not to give up, Bianca and Martin scoured the city. They visited places Ronald might go, based on his past habits and preferences. It was during these wanderings that they stumbled upon a crucial clue. In a quiet, unassuming park, they found a bench where someone had carved Ron plus Bianca inside a heart many years ago on one of their early dates. Nearby, a local vendor remembered seeing a man who matched Ronald's description, looking lost and distressed. This discovery was a turning point for Bianca. She realized that the man she was chasing, the man who had betrayed her, was also the man she had once loved deeply. The complexity of her emotions was overwhelming, but it also brought a new understanding. Ronald was not just a perpetrator, he was a victim of his own demons. As Bianca grappled with these revelations, her relationship with Martin deepened. They shared stories of their past, their losses, their regrets. Martin spoke of a time when he too had made choices he wasn't proud of, and how those choices had led him down a path of redemption. Bianca found solace in his words, realizing that everyone has chapters in their life they wish they could rewrite. The chapter culminates in an unexpected breakthrough. A phone call from a contact of Martin's leads them to a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was here, the contact claimed, that Ronald had been hiding. As Bianca stood outside the door of the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest, she knew she was on the brink of confronting not just Ronald, but also the shattered pieces of her own life. She was about to face the man who had turned her world upside down, and in doing so, she hoped to find the missing pieces of herself that she had lost along the way. With a deep breath, Bianca knocked on the door, ready to face whatever lay on the other side. This was the moment of truth, the unraveling of a mystery that had consumed her life. She was ready to face it, no matter what it revealed. The dilapidated door of the apartment creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit, sparsely furnished room. Bianca's heart raced as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, searching for the face she had both longed and dreaded to see. There, in the far corner, sat Ronald, looking more like a shadow of the man she had once known. The air was thick with tension as Bianca stepped inside, Martin lingering at the doorway, a silent sentinel. Ronald's eyes, once so full of life and laughter, now held a weariness that made Bianca's heart clench. She wanted to scream, to ask him a million questions, but words failed her. It was Ronald who broke the silence. His voice, once so confident, now trembled as he began to unravel his tale. He spoke of a failed investment, a mounting debt, and threats from dangerous people he had become entangled with. In his desperation, he had taken the savings, hoping to turn things around, to protect Bianca from the truth and the danger. As Ronald recounted his story, Bianca felt a torrent of emotions: anger, betrayal, but also an aching sorrow. She saw before her a man broken by his mistakes, consumed by fear and regret. The enormity of his betrayal was not lost on her, yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of compassion. Martin stepped forward, his presence a reminder of the reality they faced. He had connections, he said, people who could help Ronald sort out the mess he was in. But it would require Ronald to face the consequences of his actions, to cooperate with the authorities. The room fell silent as Ronald considered his options. Then, with a nod that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies, he agreed. It was a decision that marked the beginning of a long, arduous journey towards redemption. Bianca watched as Ronald was taken into custody, a part of her feeling like she was watching the last piece of their shared life slip away. Yet, there was also a sense of closure, a bitter release from the web of lies and deceit that had entangled them. In the days that followed, Bianca found herself at a crossroads. The life she had known was irrevocably changed. She could no longer return to the blissful ignorance of before, nor could she completely let go of the love she had for Ronald. She spent long hours with Martin, discussing the future, pondering the lessons they had learned. Through her journey, Bianca had discovered a strength she never knew she had, a resilience that had carried her through the darkest of times. She had also found a friend in Martin, someone who had seen her at her worst and stood by her side. As the chapter closes, Bianca stands at the window of her home, gazing out at the world that continues to move forward, indifferent to the personal storms that rage within. She knows the road ahead will be challenging, filled with moments of doubt and pain. But she also knows that she is no longer the same woman who had been blindsided by her husband's betrayal. She is stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever the future holds. With a deep breath and a determined heart, Bianca steps out of her house, closing the door on a chapter of her life, ready to begin anew. She doesn't know what the future holds, but she knows she will face it head-on, with courage and hope. This is not the end of her story, but the beginning of something new.